Mario Kart World.
Oh, come on, I haven't even said anything yet.
Mario Kart World is the 10th, yes 10th, entry in the Mario Kart series, a series that has taken many forms over the years, with 2017's Mario Kart 8 Deluxe representing the peak of the traditional formula, as I'll call it, in the eyes of several fans. This latest installment then, the flagship launch title for Nintendo's Switch 2 console, set out to usher in a fresh, new era for the kart racing juggernaut, and the changes it has introduced have been met with some, let's just call it, pushback. To say that this game has had a rough go of it as of late would be an understatement. Mario Kart World is kind of a complicated game, one that does some stuff that I don't agree with, but also has an even greater amount of stuff in it that I wholeheartedly adore, to the point where I'm confident in calling it my favorite Mario Kart yet, in spite of my qualms. It is precisely because of its complicated nature and how I've come to love so many aspects about it that I didn't expect to love that I felt extremely compelled to write about the game, knowing full well that there's a chance of bad faith actors finding this video and using the comments section as a space to continue regurgitating their vitriol towards this game and anyone who dares to share a nuanced perspective. I frankly do not care about that. All I want to do is talk about Mario Kart World, because I think it's pretty damn cool. Let's talk core fundamentals first and foremost. Mario Kart 8 refined the series' basic driving mechanics to a state of pristine polish. It is an incredibly tight and responsive racing game. Mario Kart World, while appearing very similar to its predecessor at first glance, plays quite a bit differently, to my delight. While things may feel pretty familiar when starting off, every kart now has this looser, unbalanced weight to them that becomes noticeable once you start drifting. And while that may sound unappealing if you haven't played the game for yourself, it does a lot to make the basic driving controls feel that much more flexible and engaging strangely. Drifting started to feel really good in this game once I got past the initial hurdle that is my Mario Kart 8 muscle memory. I find myself needing to be more conscious when approaching turns than I ever had to in the last game, and I feel like I just have more control over my vehicle while drifting in general. It's a small change that goes a long way in separating how the game feels, continuing the Mario Kart tradition of ensuring that every game has their own unique little gameplay variances. For me, and for many others I'd surmise, learning to leave those old Mario Kart 8 habits behind has been the biggest challenge. World is a game that asks you to adapt to its systems or risk getting left in the dust, and learning to contend with and master its assortment of new mechanics has been half of the fun. Returning elements like water have been completely reworked. In Mario Kart 7 and 8, there were underwater segments that made your kart feel floatier, but it never really felt all that different from driving on land to me. In Mario Kart World, vehicles now transform into jet skis that ride atop the water. While you do lose out on that majestic underwater scenery as a result, driving on the water is now indisputably different from driving on land, and feels like a more substantial shakeup to races than the way it was previously implemented. I'd say it's even more game-changing than anti-gravity ever was. Handling becomes a lot heavier, forcing you to rethink sharp turns and how to approach them, and you can take advantage of waves, both big and small, to trick off of them and generate mini-turbos to get the upper hand. If you land on the water from a high enough point, the buoyancy of your kart will cause it to bounce back out of the water, letting you get even more turbos in by performing tricks right after a bounce, sometimes even twice in a row. The most transformative additions to the gameplay, however, are the new parkour maneuvers. The tracks, and the world at large for that matter, are filled with rails for you to grind on now, like ordinary guardrails and train track rails, to more wacky variants like power lines and the backs of dinosaurs. You can trick off of a rail and land back on the main road, or onto another rail if you aim your jump correctly, or even stay on the same one and build up a bunch of speed in the right circumstances. Or you can choose the more radical fourth option and jump onto a nearby wall, either directly from a grind rail as I just said, or by charging up a small hop by holding down the drift button while driving in a straight line, or by using the feather power-up. You can trick off of walls just like you could while on rails, and even perform wall jumps if there is an adjacent wall just within reach. Every single stage in Mario Kart World is packed with these out-of-view paths that are only accessible by doing crazy stunts with the new parkour mechanics. Some of them were intentionally put in by the devs, while others have expectedly been found by the insanely dedicated efforts of the community. Becoming familiar with these tricks is imperative to your success, now that the madness has been dialed up to 11, and it's just so dang fun too when you try and improvise on the fly. It's a very fluid, expressive system, the likes of which Mario Kart has never had previously. With Mario Kart 8, I felt that I hit my peak a little too quickly in that game. The driving in 8 has its own intricacies to it as well, don't get me wrong, but in World, the skill ceiling feels so demonstrably high that I feel I've only barely scratched the surface. The parkour is so well implemented, and the tracks are so perfectly designed to accommodate its potential that for the very first time, I've actually taken up time trials in a Mario Kart game, competing with my friends and trying to get the lowest possible times I can. The kinds of shortcuts that are achievable with parkour are nuts, and it just scratches the speedrunner part of my brain in a way that makes me want to bust. Great Question Block Ruins has become one of my favorite Mario Kart tracks of all time, since it morphs into an entirely different beast when you take full advantage of your new abilities. There isn't a dull moment in this course. It is a certified Mario Kart banger. Frankly, nearly every one of the new and returning tracks are incredible. Newcomers like Great Question Block Ruins, Whistle Stop Summit, Dry Bones Burnout, and Salty Salty Speedway have brilliantly thought out track design with so many curated and spontaneous alternate routes that open up when you experiment with parkour. Boo Cinema, Starview Peak, and DK Spaceport may not have the most complicated layouts by comparison, but their presentations and gimmicks more than make up for it, especially DK Spaceport. This track is absolutely phenomenal. And this is probably the best Bowser's Castle in the entire series. It's metal as fuck. Why is this shortcut so hard? The retro tracks, though, have really impressed me. The way you race through them feels totally fresh because of the platforming mechanics, even when the course is more or less unchanged from its original counterpart. Some do take it a step further, though, and sport exciting alterations, like how Peach Beach takes you through the town area in the last 2 laps, and how this game's Mario Circuit fuses Mario Circuits 1 through 3 from the SNES original. The idea is just cool enough that I'm not all that bothered by seeing Mario Circuit 3 again. Moo Moo Meadows, on the other hand, Alright, hear me out. Some of these retro track choices are just a little questionable. Like, did we really need Choco Mountain and Sky High Sundae when they were both a part of the Booster Course Pass? Desert Hills? Yawn? And again, Moo Moo freaking Meadows? Like, seriously? I know that cow is a playable character now and all, but I've been racing on this course for the past 11 years, and I honestly prefer the aesthetics of 8's version a little more. All that being said, while I personally wouldn't have chosen to bring some of these back, almost all the retro courses are better than they've ever been. Choco Mountain may be missing the Cliff of Doom, but its grimy, industrial makeover is something that I actually dig quite a lot. I never cared all too much for the original Wario Stadium or Wario Shipyard, but the new rail grinding, wall riding, and water skiing mechanics elevate them so much that I now occasionally go out of my way to vote for them when I see them pop up online. Airship Fortress is awesome. Shy Guy Bazaar is very elaborate now since you can drive on more of the buildings this time around. This is a really solid selection of tracks. Even though there's still no Wario Coliseum. What the fuck? It's been 22 years. Let's direct the discussion to the visuals in Mario Kart World for a second here, because they're very important, trust me. The expressive animations and revamped art style do a lot of work at enhancing this game's charming, unmistakable identity. Taking cues from Super Mario Bros. Wonder, every character has been updated to look as if they've jumped straight out of their iconic 90s artwork, sporting nostalgic, cartoony looks that emphasize the bubbly and joyful tone that Mario Kart World proudly conveys through every fiber of its being. The immaculate use of squash and stretch further adds to how lively everything is, with the technique even being applied to the karts themselves, as if they're an extension of the characters piloting them. Mario Kart 8 already looked great, and both games do look fairly alike from a distance, but once you inspect them side by side, it's pretty difficult not to notice how stylistically different they are from one another. 8 honestly looks a little static and kind of boring now, and the model quality is just a flat-out improvement in World if you ask me. For example, looking at Donkey Kong and ignoring the obvious fact that he's the most changed character in the roster altogether, his fur, which always looked very unnatural and tacky in his 8 model to me, looks nowhere near as distracting in the new game, and his redesign feels right at home with the rest of the cast now that everything in the game is sporting a more animated aesthetic. And speaking of the cast, It's perfect. Alright, I'm kidding. There are a few glaring omissions here, even when you don't consider characters like Professor Egad or some of the RPG party members that have been on fans' wish lists for years. Characters that just make sense to have in every new Mario Kart by this point, like Diddy Kong and heck, I'd argue even Kamek, just didn't make the cut for whatever reason. Okay, I think I know the reason for Diddy Kong, but this video became way bigger than I was anticipating, so I don't really want to go into it right now. You can just pause and read this if you want. Yeah, Kamek is an item now, but that hasn't stopped Lakitu from being a racer and the referee in previous games and in this one, so that's a little annoying. But this is probably still the best and most varied pre-DLC lineup of playable characters that we've seen in the series thus far. Almost everyone you'd expect to see here is present, and now we have a slew of new faces in the form of NPC and enemy racers from Mario's storied history, and some of the ones they chose to include are pretty weird, in a good way. Of course, Cow is the one that everyone online fell in love with at first sight, even though they should have been called Moo Moo, and I will die on that hill. But we've also got a Conch Door from Super Mario 3D World, Nabbit from New Super Mario Bros. U, a Dolphin from Super Mario World, and a Pianta and Cataquack of all things from Super Mario Sunshine. There isn't a single thought in that head. They may stick out a little when compared to the typical racers we're used to seeing in these games, but they're funny, and I like having them here. And I'd sure as hell take Peepa and Coin Coffer over any of the Koopalings any day of the week. To my surprise though, the bulk of my time with Mario Kart World has mostly consisted of me playing as the regular named characters, and that's due to one simple reason: costumes. On certain tracks, you can find this new food power-up courtesy of the in-game Yoshi's food chain that gives you one of several different types of meals, and certain meals will change the outfit of the character you're playing as and permanently unlock that outfit for that character. Thank you. I can pick Mario in a Mario spin-off game without feeling any shame anymore. These new wardrobe options give the roster even more personality than they already had, and it's also encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone and choose characters that I tend to ignore in Mario Kart games, because I want to unlock as much of their swag as I can, and then wear that swag in normal gameplay. Burger Bud Toad, my sweet boy, I love you so much. King Boo is usually my main in these games, and the aristocrat fit makes him look dashing, I tell you, dashing. Yoshi can cosplay as Boshi from Super Mario RPG, Toadette has this really adorable ice cream inspired getup, and Peach's touring outfit does things to me that I don't think are appropriate for me to share here. As silly as it may sound, the amount of character that has been injected into Mario Kart World has played a massive part in how much I've been enjoying the game. Even after a month of playing it, I haven't gotten tired of this game's bright and cheerful vibes. It continues to astound me after dozens of hours of play, and I expect it will continue to do so for many more. Can we please fix this character select screen though? At the very least, can we have the game remember the last sorting option I use so that the characters are all right beside their costumes and they aren't just nonsensically spread out? Please and thank you. For the very first time, we have a Mario Kart that takes place in a giant interconnected world where every track resides in, and this formula shift informs every new decision, change, and mode that world brings to the table. It is the centerpiece that holds everything together and makes so much of this game work for me, while also being the source of some of its more controversial qualities. The expanded scale gave the devs the excuse to make many tracks wider this time around, and given this change, up to 24 contestants can now race at the same time. While this may seem like a recipe for disaster, I would like to take a minute to point out that in conjunction with the larger roads giving each racer more room to breathe, certain balancing tweaks were made so that Mario Kart World isn't a flat-out, chaotic clusterfuck of a game to play. The shock item, for instance, now only affects the racers that are in front of the person who activated it, and the time they spend being tiny has been drastically reduced compared to previous games. It's still a very powerful item, but it could have been so much worse. Generally, you don't lose as much speed when getting hit by shells and the like as well, or if you accidentally run into one of the many NPC drivers on the road found in most of the game's intermission tracks, which I'll get to in a second. The bullet bill doesn't even damage you anymore. Getting rammed by one merely throws you off your balance and interrupts your drifts. So while there is a greater risk of getting hit with an item now with the increased player count, the devs did take measures to make recovering from setbacks more manageable than ever. There's one noticeable exception to all of this though. and it's the blue shell. Whereas there were a bunch of cheeky ways to avoid it in Mario Kart 8 by abusing that game's generous number of invincibility frames, the blue shell in World doesn't give a fuck about that, and will absolutely obliterate you even if you're just recovering from another hit. Plus, as I stated, having double the amount of racers means that there are simply more items at play at any given time. Shells and bombs and fireballs may not hurt as much anymore, but getting hit by one thing after another, can still really fucking hurt. It's all a balancing act, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy process figuring out how to tune all these random variables to make sure that the game doesn't feel like complete bullshit 90% of the time, cause it doesn't. Every Mario Kart game is like this to some extent. I personally really like how hectic races can get now. I feel that the increased risk of things going to absolute shit makes strategic item play and defensive driving more important than ever. Routes that aren't necessarily the fastest are more viable than ever, if only because they offer an escape from the potential bombardment that can result from being stuck in the middle of the pack. Again, it makes racing all the more thrilling and engaging to me. There are so many factors to consider. I mentioned something about tracks being bigger now, and I was primarily referring to the aforementioned intermission tracks. Since every traditionally designed course in the game is woven into the world, the map is filled with a bunch of highways that serve the purpose of connecting them all together. With the exception of the first race in a cup, the returning Grand Prix mode now has you drive to the next course via one of these connective highways. And it's the same deal when you're playing online and the chosen stage has an arrow pointing to it. It indicates that you'll race on an intermission before everyone has to duke it out in a single, normal lap of the chosen track. The Rally Cups in the new Knockout Tour mode are mostly made up of these intermissions as well. Intermissions were something that I wasn't super convinced about before I got the game myself, since, truthfully, they did look like nothing more than straight lines to me at the time. It didn't seem like there was much going on with them, and I was worried about just how ingrained they would be if my concerns ended up being proven correct. But I nevertheless tried to go in with an open mind about them, and what I came to learn was that there is actually an impressive level of thoughtful design to this system. The way I see things, intermission tracks are meant to supplement the regular tracks by opening the door for a new kind of gameplay dynamic that the series has never really been able to experiment with prior to this open world setup, an experimental venture that I can't help but admire. Because there are so many distinct highways that lead to the same course, the total number of unique tracks there are to race on in Mario Kart World is absurd. It's not really clear when you just look at the Grand Prix. The way that I was able to notice this was from playing online, where I've been able to discover a bunch of new track permutations. Some of these permutations may have you race through a chunk of a track that is normally only accessible in free roam. You may need to drive backwards through a familiar course in some cases, and they give you the chance to actually compete on highways that are otherwise only reserved for, again, free roam. And they come with their own bundle of race-exclusive gimmicks. This is all without even mentioning that the drivable surface area in the intermissions is so large that, yeah, although they're straight lines if that's how you want to boil it down, you get so many chances to avoid the main road to the point that it's merely a suggestion in many cases. You can use mushrooms to cut through large chunks of grass or sand and maybe even find a hidden glider ramp as a reward. You can use your fancy tools to get on power lines and fences in the environment to shake things up and again get away from all the action. The volume and variety of hazards that can appear in intermission sections, from boom booms to cars that drop bombs all over the road, also means that there is usually a constant stream of obstacles and other things to look out for. Moments where there isn't much action taking place and you're kind of just casually driving in a straight line do exist, but as far as I've been able to tell, they aren't as frequent as the stretches where stuff is actually going on. Suffice it to say, I've managed to get just as much fun out of these intermission tracks as I have out of the regular ones. And it's not because I think they are equally comparable in terms of what they accomplish, because they aren't, but their individual strengths ultimately add up to create two different kinds of experiences that have both provided me with similar levels of enjoyment. Despite not featuring the same kind of expressive and technical racing that's possible on the traditional tracks, I've learned to really appreciate the intermissions and even straight up love some of them, because of all of the different ways I can traverse through them and how they naturally incorporate the vast scale of the world into the main Mario Kart gameplay loop. With all of that in mind, If I had to pick one area where Mario Kart World absolutely drops the ball in, it would be in the way it has handled options. And in the context of the intermissions, this is where things get a little murky. I like intermissions a lot, but sometimes I am in the mood for a familiar 3-lap track. When playing offline, this isn't really much to get worked up about, thanks to versus mode where you have total reign over whatever kind of course gets played on. But I don't like playing with bots very much. I like playing online with other living, breathing people. During the first 3 weeks of the game's life, worldwide races had the same voting system from Mario Kart 8. You were able to vote for any of the clearly labeled options, of which there were 3, or pick random, which would randomly choose some other track not already shown. People quickly began to notice that tracks with intermissions seemed to pop up more frequently than tracks that were just the regular 3-lap affair. Those who preferred or simply wanted to play a 3-lap track at that moment would then often choose the random option, because they figured out that whatever stage got picked via random was always intermission free. As a method to lock in a 3-lap track vote, it worked, but it was obviously a very inelegant solution to a much deeper problem, which was that this game didn't have a reliable way of letting people play online the way they wanted to. And in my first draft of this video, I expressed my wish for a future update that would simply make it easier for people to have more direct influence over how they play online. Well, a couple of weeks ago, an update for Mario Kart World was pushed out that changed the way that the random vote operates. Now, random has a chance of also choosing one of the other 3 pre-chosen tracks that, let me remind you, are very likely to feature an intermission segment. If one of the other 27 courses happens to get picked instead, it's still a 3-lap track, but it is no longer a guarantee that they will get picked via random as of the latest update. Even as somebody who likes the intermissions, as I went into earlier, I can't call this anything but a tone-deaf decision on Nintendo's part. There is no way in hell that they didn't notice the overwhelming number of players that were picking random to have some semblance of control over their Mario Kart World online experience. I expected updates to the online mode to provide us with more options, not less. And while there's still a chance that we will get dedicated classic and new modes of some kind for online play later down the road, this update has nevertheless left somewhat of a bitter taste in my mouth, no matter how much I've tried to rationalize it. I'd like to stress that I'm not saying I'm gonna stop playing this game outright because of this patch. Of course not. It is still way too much fun to even consider that. And while tracks with intermissions still seem to be more common than the alternative, it's not like classic tracks were killed off entirely, despite what some people seem to believe. Random can still pick from any of the tracks not explicitly shown on the voting screen, and any tracks that don't have the arrows pointing to them operate in accordance with the old school lap system, and they can still show up. I'd also like to reiterate that the way things used to work wasn't exactly graceful either. Before the update, you were kind of shit out of luck if you wanted to play intermission tracks online once you racked up enough VR, which seemed to increase your chances of getting thrown into lobbies with experienced players. And the competitive crowd especially has openly expressed their disapproval of intermissions, which meant that random was the dominant choice, and still kind of is. The informal rules that the community had established inadvertently created a problem where a specific playstyle just became the dominant one. And regardless of which playstyle is more popular, you can't possibly say with absolute certainty that pre-update Mario Kart World was a game that satisfied everyone. How could it? But also, the way the system works now doesn't either. I'm not trying to so much turn this into an intermissions versus classic tracks debate, as much as I'm just trying to express how upset I am at the lack of options more than anything. Unfortunately, this is just an area that Mario Kart World is sorely lacking in. This game could greatly benefit from some small but serious quality of life enhancements. Even offline, you can't play Grand Prix with the classic format, which has been the case since launch. There also isn't a way to tune the ratio of laps spent on intermissions versus laps spent on the regular track. I think that being able to choose to play 2 laps of the actual course instead of 1 would go a long way. And going back to online for a second here, you still aren't able to party up with your friends and search for an open lobby together. To be frank, this doesn't bother me a whole lot on its own. It's mildly annoying at worst in the case of normal races, but when it comes to Knockout Tour, this is where I start getting pissed, because you can't join a friend if they're already in the middle of a knockout rally. This means that the only way to play Knockout Tour with people in your friends list, without resorting to playing with computer opponents, is to join a friend during the short window before the rally begins. That sucks. And it sucks because Knockout Tour is the opposite of suck. It's freaking great. It's Mario Kart's own version of a battle royale, which in this day and age isn't the most original concept I know, but a battle royale makes so much sense in a frantic kart racer with items, and it is executed pretty much flawlessly here. Even after my fair share of first place wins, I am still chasing the high of that coveted victory royale. It is heart-pounding when you just barely make it through the checkpoint because everyone is just out for each other's blood in this mode like a bunch of ravenous maniacs. Even more than in regular races, the amount of carnage I have witnessed in rallies has been utterly daunting and hilarious at the same time. Knockout Tour is pure Mario Kart goodness. The series at its most kinetic and action-packed. I just don't get tired of it. It is such a good time, even though there is a considerable lack of rallies to choose from. There are only 8, and it becomes extremely apparent when playing online, where I've seen the same rally cup get picked 4 times in a row, which is just a little aggravating. Having more would certainly be welcome, and help give the mode even more replayability. Also, I don't know how realistic this would be, but I would really appreciate some kind of way to create custom knockout cups. As I've established, there are a buttload of track permutations and routes in the world, and I'd love to be able to utilize as many of them as possible to make my own custom rallies, and not just have them be relegated to normal races. However, I sort of expected Knockout Tour to be a slam dunk from the moment I heard about the premise in the Switch 2 Direct. What I wasn't as sure about during the pre-release period, on the other hand, was the actual open world exploration component of Mario Kart World. "You can drive virtually everywhere in this world" was the phrase they used in the first trailer, and like I'm sure many others were wondering, I was wondering the same thing too. How good will this mode actually be in execution? Well, I adore Mario Kart World's free roam. I thought that it would be neat at best, something I'd play around with for an hour or two and never touch again. But it didn't take very long for me to understand the vision the devs were shooting for here. When looking at it for what it is, free roam is one of the purest and most magical gaming experiences I've had in a modern AAA game. Before I get into the why, I want to make this perfectly clear. I am not saying that Mario Kart World's world is going to blow your socks off in the same way a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 would, as a content-rich, realistic, immersive sim kind of thing. While there are literally hundreds of tiny challenges to tackle and so many collectibles to find in these environments, completing these activities doesn't actually contribute to anything really. The only rewards here are stickers. There is no structure to anything here at all, frankly. You aren't doing P-switch missions to complete NPC quests. You aren't running over question mark panels to unlock new carts or skins. You aren't collecting Peach medallions to use as currency for a toll road to open up a new chunk of the map and progress through some story, because that's not what this is. This isn't a story mode. The closest thing you can compare it to is Mario Kart DS's mission mode given the P-switches, and even then, there are no bosses, no higher ranks to strive for, and no real way to even track them. They are not the focus here. They're just little distractions that you can choose to participate in if you feel inclined to do so. I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't have welcomed a big, epic, fleshed out adventure mode with a clearly defined endpoint to work toward, or even if I said that a part of me wasn't low-key wishing for something like that. But like I said, Mario Kart World's free roam is not that. And my brother in Christ, that is fine. In hindsight, I am honestly kind of grateful for that Mario Kart World Direct, because while I agree that it could have been an email and it didn't exactly reveal anything new, it tempered my expectations and brought me back down to earth like you wouldn't believe. and it is a big reason why my impressions of the free roam ended up being so positive. There is a reason it is called free roam. There is a reason that it's not even really treated as one of the front-facing modes of the game like Grand Prix and Knockout Tour. It's tucked away in its own little corner on the title screen, for crying out loud. It knows what it is and doesn't try to be anything more. It is a way for you to freely drive through the world, to freely roam through it, if you will, unencumbered and untethered. There are extra things to do, sure, but they are secondary in the face of just letting loose and exploring the map to your heart's content and relishing in the simple comfort that comes from that. Free roam reminds me of the aimless romps I would go on in my favorite childhood games that housed very similar sandboxes. Ever played Cars the video game on GameCube? This was my shit back in the day, and I never expected Mario Kart World of all games to be the closest thing I've played that feels like a spiritual successor to the fucking licensed Disney game starring the Owen Wilson race car. Coming to this realization has actually made me stop to rethink what made these 6th generation worlds so captivating to wander through when I was younger, even when I wasn't doing anything important. And I think I figured out my answer, and it's pretty straightforward. These open worlds, in some form or another, gave me personal, intrinsically driven reasons to explore, without relying on the overused contemporary blueprint of just giving the player an excessively bloated checklist of chores to complete to trick them into thinking, oh, this open world actually has a lot going on in it, when it may very well not once you dig deeper than the surface layer. Once you've actually gone and checked everything off of that list, and you find yourself unmotivated to return to the world after the fact. Meanwhile, the car game for babies lets me take a leisurely drive through a virtual recreation of Radiator Springs while listening to licensed 80s music. You can't do that in Horizon. Mario Kart World's free roam manages to avoid the most common open world trappings by not allowing itself to be bogged down by the conventions of the genre that have consequently made me lose interest in so many of these games in the past. This game, rather, chose to place its main focus on two key things: the world itself and how wonderfully and imaginatively designed it is, and a concept as uncomplicated as have fun. Go wherever you want and just have a good time. You don't need to worry about finishing X number of missions or collecting X number of medallions. There's no fear of this being some cookie cutter map with 1,000 tiny points of interest and bloated menus and skill trees with text that is way too fucking small to read. And that's not to say that games that have these elements are inherently bad. It's just that there are already plenty of them out there to choose from. So what's so wrong about this game deciding not to conform to what most other open world titles are already doing? Mario Kart World is unconcerned with trying to fit into that mold. Instead, it found a way to make me appreciate the mundaneness of the most rudimentary, downplayed elements that I tend to ignore in other games because I just get so hyper-fixated on a bunch of other crap. Here, I can just wave hi to the Yoshis and Toads on the side of the road. I observe as they board buses or sit around a campfire, then hijack a UFO and kidnap them because I'm a dick. I like slowly driving through Dino Dino Jungle to look around and ogle at its new Jurassic Park inspired makeover. One of my favorite moments was when I processed the horror of Toad's factory being located in close proximity to a flying fleet of warships and Bowser's fucking castle. I can just take a stroll through the haunted cinema, the bazaar, the bustling streets of Crown City, ascend to the Comet Observatory, and then make my way down the snowy mountain, all because they're things that I want to do. I use charge jumps and wall riding and all of the other parkour mechanics to see just how many areas I can reach, because this is essentially a platforming game now and it's freaking awesome. And I may incidentally discover a new shortcut that I can try out in a regular race by doing so. It's not even a mainline game, but Mario Kart World feels like a celebration of Mario's entire legacy. And discovering all these Easter eggs has been a reward in and of itself as a lifelong fan of these games and characters. But the moments that truly took my breath away were the subdued, quiet ones, where I would stop for a second to gaze at the gorgeous scenery and forget about everything else for a little while. Mario Kart World's decision to leave its free roam as this untarnished, unburdened optional mode that provides a healthy outlet to escape from the pressures of life was a brave move, and I respect it so much for that. But even then, there is stuff to do. Even though objectives are downplayed in favor of aimless driving and exploration, they do exist and are here if you want to engage with them. And they're pretty great. People have been hankering for the return of DS's mission mode, and the P-switches are the closest we've gotten to that. Some of them even reveal that there are retro tracks from Super Mario Kart just hidden in plain sight. Having to pause and investigate my surroundings to reach some of these P-switches, and especially the Peach medallions and question panels, and then trying to actually maneuver my way there, it's so goddamn cool. A tracking system would simplify the process of searching for these for completion purposes, which has been a very common complaint about this mode, but it would also encourage a systematic and routine way of engaging with the world when much of what's great about it is, again, the personal discoveries many of us wouldn't have otherwise made if there was a checklist that the game pushed onto us. And oh my god, I can't possibly end this video without mentioning the music. When I heard that remix of the Super Mario Land BGM, I was like, Jungle Hijinks made me go, Gusty Garden Galaxy had me like, this soundtrack is magnificent. It is like 90% responsible for why I'm going to keep coming back to Free Roam every now and then, I swear. Music is a truly powerful tool that can elevate a game to unprecedented levels of greatness. Without those licensed songs, I wouldn't have spent nearly as much time wandering the empty desert in the Cars video game. Without Mario Kart World's nostalgic remixes, moments like these would be nowhere near as effective as they are. I got a little emotional when I heard the new rendition of Super Mario 64 Staff Roll. That game and that song mean so much to me, and something about hearing it come on the radio while playing this absolutely whimsical video game hit me in just the right spot. The Mad Lads even went as far as paying tribute to the rumors subculture that has become a defining part of that game's legacy by adding in the ability to access mirror mode in the open world by driving through that iconic glass portrait of Peach at the top of the castle. That shit nearly brought a tear to my eye. Is what I may have said had this Easter egg not been spoiled for me thanks to a YouTube thumbnail. At least I wasn't spoiled about the new Rainbow Road, which was kept secret until the game came out. I'm happy I at least got to see this with my own eyes. What an absolutely extraordinary track. Everything about it, from how you get transported to the course via this beam of light, to the sections where you race through this gorgeous river and this giant space station, is peak Mario Kart. Simply a spectacular finale and embodiment of everything this game represents. Mario Kart World is impressive in how it chose not to adhere to expectations. The expectations of how the devs would handle the open world, how they'd merge it with the tried and true Mario Kart formula, how unlocking characters would work, etc. Personally, I couldn't be more happy about the fact that what we ended up getting wasn't Mario Kart 9 or Mario Kart 10 or whatever. Because while I have no doubt that a game that followed closely behind 8's footsteps would have been stellar, Mario Kart World has given me so much more to think about and so many new reasons to love not just the broader Mario Kart franchise, but video games as a whole. I love and respect this game a great deal, and I expect to be playing it for many years to come. Thanks for watching. Oh, battle mode's alright too, I guess.